what most business owners really struggle with. It's that they don't obsess about the problems that they're going to have. They obsess about the problems that they have today.
Most business owners will say people are their biggest problem. And you guys have figured out that people are your biggest assets. If you're going to do anything big, you are going to hit roadblocks. You're going to hit these perceived failures.
Some people just sit and think, and they don't get themselves obsessed with what could their life look like.
Being around people who energize and inspire us is a key component in living the growth mindset. And our guest today does exactly that for us. She's the co-founder and president of Cardone Ventures, a company that went from idea to $500 million of revenue in just 5 years. In this conversation, we're going to unpack where that idea came from, what it took to scale the business, and then a bunch of more golden nuggets. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you're going to love it as well. So without further ado, please help me welcome Natalie Dawson to the podcast. Natalie, there's two types of people. There's the people who sit at the dinner table, they have an idea, and quite honestly, they mentally masturbate about that idea, never taking action. And then there's the people who have an idea and in 5 years take that idea, take massive action, and create $500 million of revenue from that idea. What do you think the difference is between those two types of people?
I think the difference between those two types of people are some people just sit and think, I can't do this. It's for somebody else. This isn't for me. And they don't get themselves obsessed with what could their life look like. When I think about what my life could look like, there's still so much more that I could create. There's so much more that I'm excited about and that I want to believe can really happen for my life. And what I really think it comes down to is somebody doesn't think that they can create the life that they want. They don't think that they can have the big things. They don't think that they're worthy of the fancy car or being able to donate to their favorite charity or make the impact that they want to make. They truly just don't feel good enough to be able to take the action, to learn the skills, because it's not really that hard. You're listening to a podcast right now. You're thinking about, can I leave my job and leave the 9-to-5 grind to be able to start a business? Well, yes, you can do it. You can learn the skills. You are not any less smart. You are not any less capable than anybody who has made this happen. You just have to believe that you actually can, instead of just constantly reiterating the idea in your head. As soon as you get it out of your head and into action and into execution, it becomes real and you can create it and start testing your idea. Does it work? Maybe it's really shitty. Okay, great. The first idea is shitty. Let's move into the second idea. Let's work our asses off in order to figure out if the second idea works. Oh, we're getting some traction. Okay, now what's working? Now what's not working? And you continue to iterate. But if you just think, oh, no one's going to take me seriously. No one's going to listen to me. I don't believe in myself. I don't have any confidence. You're never going to take action. And that is the difference between people who are successful and people who just sit and mentally masturbate, to use your words.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One thing I love you said is it's actually simple. It's not easy, because if it was easy, anybody would do it. It takes discipline, consistency, grind, hard work, positive pivots. Like you said, if you're going to do anything big, you are going to hit roadblocks. You're going to hit these perceived failures, right? But it's the simple steps, fortifying your mind. It's not that difficult, right? It's actually pretty simple if you just can bring discipline and consistency. It's not easy, because otherwise anyone would do it. But it's not this rocket science thing, just like you said, and it's attainable. It just starts in your mind. One of the things I want to go back, because it does start in your mind. The idea starts in your mind. And if you look at, for example, Natalie and Brandon Dotson today, you can see everything you've built. But that all started, there was a seed where that started. Can you take us back to where this idea of Cardone Ventures started, and we'll go from there?
For sure. When I think back to Cardone Ventures, it didn't necessarily start when the business started. It started when I had a vision for my life when I was 12 years old. I will never forget watching The Devil Wears Prada. It is a very girly movie. A lot of dudes do not watch Devil Wears Prada, but if you are a girl, you've watched Devil Wears Prada. And the opening scene is all of these different New York women who are putting on their earrings or putting on their makeup, and they're in these New York penthouses, and they walk into their fancy jobs with their offices at Vogue. And I remember thinking, like, my life is going to turn out like that. I want that for me. I don't want to be in some boring job. I don't want to be in a job that I hate. I want to feel glamorous. I want to put on clothes that I love. So I just had this big vision for what my life was going to look like. And then high school, and as we know each other from college, turned into my life. And I was like, I freaking hate Portland, Oregon. There's nobody like me around here. The think that's around me is not this big New York skyrise. It's like this little tiny gray shitty place. And I almost gave up on my dreams back then until I started actually dating my now husband. And he is the biggest believer, the biggest dreamer, the biggest visionary. And he started breathing life back into these 12-year-old visions that I had. And so I started to believe in these things. And when he sold his business, I was dating him. We had been dating for 3 or 4 years. In those 3 or 4 years, entirely lost my own confidence because I felt like people just thought of me as dating this older guy who was a lot wealthier than I was, and were just going to write me off as a gold digger. So here I had these dreams, I had this vision for what my life was going to turn out like, and then I started to kind of believe in them, but succumb to, oh, I'm not going to put in the work because no one's going to take me seriously. And when Brandon had a similar situation happen after he sold his business, where he was like, maybe both of us just kind of feed into our own insecurities and our own self-doubt. Mine was that I was young and that I was dating an older guy. His was that he got successful with his business. He had this home run. What if he can't do it again? What if the next one isn't as good as the first one was? So both of us kind of festered in this lack of belief. And it took one of us to say, hey, wait a second. No, this is not what we're going to do. We are going to create the life that we want. We're going to create this vision that we had for why we got together to begin with. And that's what really set us down this path to create Cardone Ventures in 2019, where we suck out Elena and Grant Cardone in order to be, I guess it would be sucked. It would be sucked out. It would be, we seeked out. We did not suck out. We seeked out Grant and Elena Cardone. And we started Cardone Ventures as this idea to be able to help business owners grow and scale and get the resources that they need in order to build businesses and build better businesses than what they were able to achieve just in their small market without somebody breathing life into their opportunity.
Yeah, I love it. And thank you for sharing that entire picture. And also, I think that people should be unapologetically go after their dreams. Like you said, when you were that 12-year-old girl, you almost got, like, whether it's experience, culture, whatever, the environment, it almost got taken away from you and out of you. But thank goodness that you found that again. Like anybody, right? Here's how you know if you're with somebody that you're supposed to be with in life is if they bring the best out of you, right? Your dreams, if they make your dreams come true. And that's exactly what Brandon did. Going all the way back to that 12-year-old girl, he woke that back up inside of you. And it's pretty amazing to watch you guys do it. Another component I think is actually pretty fascinating. Like you said, there was some doubt, there was some fear for both of you. Then there was clarity. And then it wasn't just, okay, now there's clarity, but then there was massive action. There's a story of once you got clarity on that, Natalie, you were driving, you were on a drive, and you put on Grant Cardone's book. Was it 10X that you put on? And he, like Brandon, from what I understand, he was kind of mad at you. It was like a 3-hour drive. You're like, no, we're listening to it anyways. I think his daughter was in the back. You're like, nope, we're putting it on anyways. And off you go. And from what I understand, like about 30 minutes into it, even though he didn't really want to listen to it, he started laughing a little bit. He could relate with what was happening. And then boom, that idea you planted, hey, this is actually somebody that we like. We relate to them. Yep. We can align with them. And then you very intentionally, it's not just, that's what I think is important. If you have an idea, you can't just again mentally masturbate about it. And then when somebody else comes up with it, say, oh, that was my idea just at the dinner table. That's like the average person, what most people do. But you very intentionally set your actions in place. I mean, all the way down to choosing what seat to be at so you could have a good relationship and meet, right? All the way to studying where you should sit so that you could slowly, authentically, and in a real way build a relationship. And then, like you said, 5 years later, look at what you guys have created, you know? And one thing, as far as, like you said, maybe one thing I'll say, and one thing I really admire about you specifically, you're the co-founder and the president of building this company that has gone from, in year one, confirm these numbers with me, but in year one, when you guys started the idea, Cardone Ventures, we had a $2.7 million revenue. Year two, up to 14 million. Yep. Year three, 38. Yep. Year four, 82. And year five closed out at 146 $1 million. It's
wild.
Would you have ever thought that could happen?
I didn't really believe that it could happen when it started. I believe that we could build something great and build something big, but where it is today is not where we started when we decided to start this business. So looking back and hearing those numbers, like I'm still the same person that was insecure as a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old. Like you don't just divorce yourself from that person. So you can remember and recall times when you hadn't created the thing yet and you didn't have confidence, and those same feelings still exist today after having created this big business, because I believe that once capable people start creating things, their drive and their urge to create more things and to make a bigger impact just increases. That's why you watch these titans. You think about Elon Musk, you think about Jeff Bezos. They don't stop creating once the first company is successful. They keep doing it. And I think it's a very natural thing for people to do, but it's uncomfortable because once you realize you're capable of helping people, you almost have this responsibility that you carry to continue to help people. You can't just go off to Cabo San Lucas and check out. There's this thing that eats at you if you really do have the capability to help and impact people. So today, it's funny thinking about all the success, because tonight I'm going to go have a date night with Brandon, and we're going to sit and talk about how incredible it has been over the last 5 years to build what we've built. But honestly, like why we're dissatisfied and upset that we haven't made a bigger impact in all the things that we want to do over the next 5 years. And we really are, I kid you not, this isn't like a nice thing to say on a podcast. Like we really are a little bit disappointed in the impact that we've made up until this point, because we recognize how much bigger it could be. So the fact that we haven't brought on 1,000 business owners, 1,000 team members into this headquarters, into our facilities, and we don't do this every single month, it's like, oh, that's the next target. And we're still as hungry as we used to be. We just have more resources and a lot more confidence that people are able to use to back us to make better decisions a lot faster, to join our team or to do business with us.
Yeah, that's the mindset of a true competitor, somebody who is constantly living the growth mindset. And I think that I understand the feeling of that disappointment for sure. And you also said something, that a true competitor, a true entrepreneur, they're in it for the game. Every single day they're in it for the game. There is no end to the game. They're in it for the game. So it doesn't matter what's happening in the game, whether there's a lot of problems, a lot of winning, they're in it for the game. And when you really take that mindset to it, you can always reflect on it. You can always grow. You can always get better. And I think I love that idea. And you can see that's you guys' approach. There is not a end goal. It's just continuing to get better and better and better at the game and grow more. So I like that. And it's people probably, in hearing you say that you guys are disappointed, it probably is wild for them, but that just shows you, because that's the type of mind that it takes to build what you guys have built. Going back to from the beginning, the idea, and then growing it from $2.7 million in year one to $146 million in year 5, that doesn't happen by accident, right? There's a very strategic, systematic way that there's a cycle of scaling, as you would say in your book, that has to occur. Can you talk to us about what it took, the systems and the people to grow it into the business we see today?
For sure. So when I think about the business, and I work with thousands of business owners constantly on their own cycle of business. And so when I think about what most business owners really struggle with, it's that they don't obsess about the problems that they're going to have. They obsess about the problems that they have today. So if you have 10 team members today, you're thinking about Bob and Joe and Sally, and you're frustrated with performance, you're frustrated with what's happening. You're not spending that time in the shower or on your drive into work thinking about, okay, in 6 months from now, we're going to have 25 people. So what breaks? And I find that the successful business owners just obsess about what's going to break, not what is breaking. And sure, there are things breaking when you have 10 team members. That's no question. There's no doubt. There's hundreds of things and a never-ending to-do list that you could be spending your time doing. But instead of thinking and just obsessing about those things, you have to get yourself out of the present and into 6 months from now, when we grow, what breaks. So if you have a team that has one salesperson on it, and in order to get to your 6-month revenue target, you know that you're going to have 4 salespeople, which means that you're going to have to put a leader in place and you're going to have 3 other people on that team. What leader is going to be ready by then? Well, you recognize that Joe, your current salesperson, is fantastic on the phones, but he's a shit leader currently. He doesn't communicate very well. He doesn't show up consistently. He's a little bit of a jerk to other people. No one likes working with him. If Joe is your best salesperson, in 6 months from now, you can't just bring somebody from the external world into run the sales team because Joe's going to push them out. So you actually have to start having the conversation with Joe today about leading in 6 months from now so that he's preparing himself. So when you start to think about what breaks in 6 months from now, what breaks in 12 months from now, and you obsess on those problems, you pull those problems into today, you start solving those problems today so that in 6 months from now, you can solve the problems that you're going to have in 6 months from then. But it's just a mindset shift for most people because they can't get themselves out of what is actually broken today, and they find themselves stuck in solving today's problems. And when you look at business stats and when businesses tend to fail, it's around the 12 employee mark. Well, if you really think about that, 12 employees is about the time when the leader, the business owner, can no longer manage everybody. There starts to become a second layer of management, and those team members aren't prepared to lead other people, which causes retention issues, which causes the business owner to step back in to fill those roles, and then they lose their confidence. So if you could just get in front of that cycle, you would break the stats for the majority of business owners that do fail or do stop growing after that 12 employee mark.
Yeah, I love it. You're proactively looking at what's going to happen in the future. You're making that chess play. You're bringing it into the now. Mm-hmm. And then inevitably, as you grow, it's proactively, it's like the same idea of when I just finished a podcast with Brandon, and I asked him, hey, what do you need to 9-figure mindset? We've got it. What do you need to do to have a 10-figure mindset? And most people, when you ask them, they'd say, oh, great question. Let me think about that for a second. And they might spew off a couple ideas. There was a methodical plan of exactly how it was going to get done. It's been planned, actually. The domains have been bought, the trilogies have been set, everything that needs to happen, it was already proactively planned methodically, right? It was great to see when you see that answer, you see what it takes, right? That's what it takes. It's the same thing you're saying. Start solving your problems that are going to come up 6 months from now or a year from now, and let's bring them into today. Another great thing that you wrote about and that you guys do is, especially as you're scaling, it takes people. And people is, like most business owners will say, people are their biggest problem. And you guys have figured out that people are your biggest assets. And there's a system that you've used as you've grown to these employees from, starting it to now over hundreds of employees, 280 in Cardone Ventures. So there's a system that you talk about on employment engagement. And there's 3 phases within employment engagement that you talk about: the alignment, making sure that people are aligned, that they call it the onboarding process, right? Then the engagement, right? The development component, that's when they're developing, they're being engaged. And then the transition. And what I like that you said about the transition point, whether that's you're going to get a raise or you're going to move up, you're going to go from being just a salesperson to the sales leader. You can only transition in the Dawson companies, Cardone Venture companies, if you're the best, once you become the best, right? And you talked about when you're looking at that employment engagement and you're looking at your employees, you had percentages that needed to be in each phase. Can you talk about that a little bit as well?
Well, first of all, I'm so impressed that you know the level of detail that you know about my books and this process, because it shows that you really care and you're paying attention. And so many people just don't. They have access to the information, but they don't really understand what somebody is talking about. So the fact that you know this, I'm so impressed.
Well, it's a great book. It means a lot to us.
I agree that it's a great book.
Go buy it.
Yeah, definitely go buy the book. But yeah, so when you think about your team members and you require yourself to put them in these phases, how many people do you actually have that are aligning with your business versus developing? Most people get stuck in this development purgatory, which is about 80% of team members. Your disengaged people, the people that you're most frustrated with, they're just in this phase of, I'm supposed to be developing myself, but really they're not. They're just collecting a paycheck. They're showing up, they're clocking in, they're clocking out. And so if you're not growing your business, if your revenue isn't growing, it's likely because you as the business owner are spending all of your time focused on problems, focused on today's issues, and nobody else is focused on revenue growth. Nobody else is focused on the expansion that needs to happen in the business. So why would you think that something's growing? And I always ask business owners, what percentage of your time is actually being spent on growth-related initiatives? If it's less than 5%, why would you expect that you're growing by more than 5%? So this mindset shift has to happen, but it starts with, how do I expect that my team members are also focused on growth-related activities? And if you want your team members to focus on your goals, if you want them to create any opportunities inside your business, if you want them to create revenue, that means that you have to care about their goals. You have to care about how they see themselves transitioning this organization. How do they see themselves making more money? And honestly, you have to sell them on why this is important. There is such poor financial literacy in this country. And as business owners, we can take responsibility for our team members to have bigger financial targets. One of my goals is for every one of the team members who works inside this business to come inside here and say, wow, I can have more. I could do more. I could pay off not just my own debts, but I could actually contribute to other people's financial situation. I could contribute to my parents' financial debt situation. I could contribute to my community's financial situation. How could I take responsibility for that? So when you think about your environment like this, and you think about the fact that most of your team members are stuck in this development phase, you have to get yourself out of thinking that development is where people come to die in your business. And you have to focus on what would need to happen for them to transition. So the target should be anywhere between 30 to 40% of your team members are actively in this process where they are moving out of development and transitioning into new roles, new responsibilities, because your business can afford to pay them more, because your business is making more money, because they're solving the right problems.
Yeah, I love it. And the specific one what I love about that, the phases, again, is to transition. It's very clear what you need to do, and you need to become the best. It's not just automatic thing. You need to become the best. You cannot transition until you become the best at that existing role. Even if that starts with call center side, like if you need to become the best you can be and show that you can provide a ton of value, new ideas, and then you can pivot. Another video you put out that I actually really liked was, and I think sometimes people don't pay attention to that alignment phase. Just the other day, you put out a great video of the onboarding process, and somebody came on, they were problem solved. Like they really wanted to go in, they wanted to problem solve, but the problem was they didn't get aligned with everything yet. They didn't understand the full picture yet. You had communicated with them pretty clearly, like, hey, right now you're in your alignment phase. I need you to understand the full picture. I don't need you to solve problems yet. They didn't listen. And then, like you said, you had to let them go. But it's really important to figure out both, if your employer is going to lay out a great phase like that, it's also really important to pay attention to what phase you're in and play through that. And I love that idea. It's something that we're going to work to implement, because as we grow, right, it's one thing to have a small group. We wear all the hats initially. Then it's another thing to have a small group. And then, like you said, we're at the 9 employee range. As we head into 2025, we'll be right in that, kind of right at the business breaking point of 12 employees. So either we're going to scale up, make it happen, and follow the frameworks that you guys have implemented in others, or we're just going to hit that same plateau, right? And so we're really actively working on it. And one of the things I wanted to pick your brain on, because I know you're meticulous about this, is yes, we have the employment engagement and the phases, but what about KPIs and like clarity on KPIs, key performance indicators, and incentives? Can you talk through the plan that you guys put together for your employees on that and how you came up with those?
So I can absolutely talk about this, but I have a funny, quick story to tell you. So I'm getting trashed on TikTok right now for that video that you're talking about, where I told somebody—
The one I liked?
The one that you liked, the alignment one.
Yeah,
where
I liked
told
it.
them, I was like, listen, you have to stop solving these problems.
Yeah.
Funny enough, the problem that they were solving, this guy came in, he was supposed to run our social media team, and he wanted to fire this company that I was just telling you about that has gotten spectacular results. Like, they are the best of the best. And he hopped on the first call with them and was like, they don't know what they're doing. They don't have an SEO strategy. And I was like, we are not freaking firing these people. This is the worst idea you could ever come up with. Well, fast forward, the results that this company has achieved for us is performing— it's outperforming any expectation we could have ever had, which is why you have to go with your gut when you're a business owner. The wrong thing would have been to hire some expert in social media for him to evaluate everything that we're doing and start cutting off things that actually worked in our business, which is going back to these incentives. I think it's important to craft the right incentives, because his incentives should have had nothing to do with the existing performance. So when you can benchmark, and if you are listening to this and you have nowhere to start with incentives, this is how you do this. You benchmark your existing performance, your existing sales team. If you have a recruiter, how many interviews they currently do, how many resumes they currently review. You look at what's happening that's currently allowing your business to run today. And then you say, what would have to happen? How would that have to grow in order for us to hit our targets? Would we have to put out twice as much content? Would we have to be hiring twice as many people or interviewing twice as many people? And you craft the incentives based off of what that growth is. Now, the fastest way to know how to create the right incentives for your team members, if you've never rolled this out before, is to accidentally overpay in your incentives. Now, why should you accidentally overpay? When you focus on overpaying somebody, that means that you are going to have to solve what is driving the business forward. If I know that I'm paying 30% more than I want to be paying, I'm going to ensure that they are driving 60% growth because I don't want to be overpaying by 30%. So you make this problem important for you to solve. What the average business owner does is they show up to their team and they never put incentives in place because it's difficult to tie performance into what creates growth. If you put incentives in place and you just start playing this game, as you mentioned, business is a game. Incentives is the greatest game that you can play in any business. This is what you focus on. You say, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. The growth is important, so I'm going to incentivize them, and I'm likely going to pick the wrong incentives the first month, and I'm going to pick the wrong incentives the second month, and I'm going to pick the wrong incentives the third month. But by the fourth month, I'm going to freaking figure this out because I don't want to continue to overpay when the revenue and the profitability of the business isn't growing. So you pick a number. Again, I like 30% of payroll because it's freaking painful for business owners to overpay 30% of payroll, but that forces you to solve the problem for all of the roles that you have. The 9 roles that you have, it's going to force you to say, okay, I'm going to look at this every freaking month. I'm going to review my financials every freaking month to redirect the incentives every month until I find the right incentives for every single role. And it's like playing this big fun game.
Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate that because it's for somebody that's listening and for myself, it's really easy for me to put incentives in place on a sales base, right? Mm-hmm. That's easy, simple. The ones that are challenging are some of the back office or creative incentives. What kind of incentives or KPIs are you putting in place for the ones that aren't as easy? So the creative roles or social media roles, or let's say your accounts payable and accounts receivable. What are some of the ways that, since I don't want to have to learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want to fast track.
For sure.
What are some of the ways that you figured out work well for those?
Yeah, so when somebody is in a more operational role, they aren't specifically driving revenue. What you want to focus on is how do you get them to optimize the time that is spent in the business. So I think about our creative roles. If I have a videographer inside our business who is responsible for editing and creating 15 pieces of content in a certain period of time, I would pay somebody more if I never had to look at a single video because I trusted the way that they edited them, versus the videographer who takes the shot and then adds some weird transition, has misspellings, doesn't make it super captivating, and then I have to give feedback and we go back and forth 2 or 3 times. How valuable is my time in having to even look at that video? It's incredibly valuable. So I'm going to incentivize somebody based off of the amount of times that I have to review something. Now, if they're in more of a client-facing role where you're having to...
Great fucking idea.
It's a great idea. Because I really had to freaking figure this out.
It's a great
so
idea.
You're really trying to maximize... Like, where do you have to spend your time and how do you spend less time and increase the amount of trust that that person can do something super freaking well, that you can just leave it there and you know that they're going to handle it?
Yeah, it's production time. It's genius. It's really, sometimes it's like the simplest things, they become the most genius things because it's production time. You think about it in like construction context. If you look at excavation, excavators are always trying to figure out their least path of travel time from dirt to dump truck, where they have to go. They're trying to find the production cycle. The faster they can get the production cycle done, the more money they're going to make. It's the same thing if you're producing something creative and content. Mm-hmm. If it takes one and done, right? One and done, like you said, is way faster. I'm going to incentivize that. The quality is going to be better. While they're producing that piece of content, they now know, I could just imagine when you're editing, they now know if they can make this the best piece that they can make. They have all these filters. Like they put themselves almost in your shoes thinking, hey, I know what feedback Natalie is going to give me. And if you can reduce that production time, I couldn't agree more. That's a really clever way to do that. What about additional operational ones? We talked about social media. What about other operational, like accounts payable or other operational ones that have been challenging to find incentives that you've cracked the code on?
Yeah, so accounts receivable, how do you get your payment as quickly as possible? That one could be pretty straightforward.
Submit by 4. If you can get it all down to 14 days, great.
If you can get down to 14 days, could you get it down to 5 days?
Exactly.
Would I be willing to pay somebody more for 5 days? Because if you start to look at the drop off between 14 to 5, you could have clients actually go cold in that process where the money becomes past collectible time frame versus getting it a lot sooner. That's going to make a big difference. I'm not responsible any longer for accounts payable, so I'd have to think on that one. But other operational roles, what I think about when I'm creating an incentive, let's say you have somebody talking to your clients each and every day. How do you duplicate what you do when you're talking to a client? Well, you'd have them look at the script, but how do you know that they're actually using the script the way that you would use the script? Well, I would ensure that every call is recorded, and I'm actually going to pay incentives based off of people putting the call recording in a Dropbox.
Yep.
Why is that? If they don't put the call recording in a Dropbox, and let's say that person gets promoted, I can't bring somebody in who's new to that client and get them ramped up to speed very quickly. I have to potentially lose the client because they're frustrated that they have to explain their business to somebody else. So if I have somebody that's in that current client-facing role that is properly uploading not just the notes, but also the video, I'm actually willing to pay that person more, not because it makes them better at their job, but it allows the next person who talks to that client to be much more effective and reduces my client attrition that could potentially happen because of that disruption in the client service.
I love it. I really appreciate it. I want to pivot a little bit to, let's call it the dynamics of what it takes to work with your husband, but not just your husband, also your brother, and then even Brandon. Brandon's brother's in here. Most people say don't work with your spouse, definitely don't work with your family, but you guys have figured out a way to do that and create a culture. What is that like? And just talk us through, why it's working so well for you guys.
We make it work. We committed at the beginning of this that our marriage between Brandon and I was the most important thing. But if we didn't help each other achieve each other's goals, what is the purpose of the marriage? So when we're in meetings that might get tense or might be frustrating, we remember what our roles are, and we remember that our marriage is priority. So if our role in the meeting is I'm the decision maker, he can have whatever opinion he wants, but he is going to respect the fact that I am the decision maker, and we're not going to bring our marriage into that conversation. If he's the decision maker and he has the stats in the area, whatever it is that we're talking about, that I don't have the stats in and he's the decision maker, I'm not throwing in, oh, you don't love me. Why aren't you using my decision? I'm emotional about the fact that you're overcoming whatever it was that I thought my idea was great around. I'm just going to let the facts show that he should be making this decision. And we do a really good job of reminding each other what our stats are. I have better stats when it comes to bringing on people in our business. I am 99% of the time correct when I see a red flag or there's an issue with somebody and I call that out. Brandon's stats aren't as good as mine, so he lets me make those decisions. When it comes to bringing on a potential partner, he right now has better stats than I do on which partners have been successful and which ones have been unsuccessful. So when we're evaluating partnerships, even when I'm super emotional and saying I don't want to partner with these people, he will say, what are the stats? And it's that simple. What are the stats? We're not going to get emotional. We're not going to get frustrated. It's not because you're my husband or you're my brother that I'm allowing this decision to be made. It's because I have the stats or you have the stats to make this decision. So we're going to make the decision that's in the best interest of the entire company. And because we're so aligned on, as a family, we're so aligned on the fact that this business needs to grow, the fact that we have responsibility to everybody, not just our own personal ego, it allows us to move through these conversations quicker. It's not to say that they aren't sometimes still challenging or frustrating, but I honestly, Brandon would attest to this, we get in one big fight a year. We do not fight. We do not sweat the small stuff. We do not go home and bicker about stuff. We are so thankful for what we've created, and we keep really focused on what he's good at, and I let him do that. He knows what I'm good at, and he lets me do that. And whenever there's this potential disagreement on where we're going to go and the direction that we're going to head, we really just use the stats that either one of us has to make the decision on who is the best person to make the best decision for the company.
Yeah, I love it. What I hear you guys say and what you've done so well is you have the clarity of where the vision's going to go, the clarity on what you want, and then you add that because you have the clarity, then you can also have accountability. If it's not clear, if nobody knows where you're headed, what the vision is, and if you weren't aligned in that, then there would be this weird accountability thing, and you could see how egos could get in the way, so on and so forth. But because you have the clarity, you can have mass accountability, and that's where you get the greatest thing. You have a rule that I really like. You call it the 0 inbox rule. Can you tell us a little bit about the 0 inbox rule?
Oh man, I feel bad that you're calling me out on this right now because I have not been following my own rule, but my rule is to hit inbox 0. And I've made this transition. It's actually a really important transition to me. It's not like I'm just letting my accountability go. I used to prioritize getting to inbox 0, which means that there's no email left in my inbox because I am the keeper of communication. I am either the bottleneck, the thing that slows everything down, or the thing that allows everybody to move quickly and to know where we're going, what we're doing. And so for so long in our business, I played this role of I hit inbox 0 because people are depending on me for an answer and for a response. In the last 9 months, I've had to pivot out of that role because I can't be the person that is tied to my email, ensuring that every single communication is approved or there's feedback. I have to get rid of that to be able to spend more time. And what the time is that I'm spending is what we were talking about earlier, which is social media. I have to make time to do that because there literally are not enough hours in the day for me to handle both. And so what was I willing to do? Continue to do something that's really comfortable and actually fairly straightforward for me, which is just answering emails, or getting myself out of this like technical thing of emails and spreadsheets and KPIs and go into this very creative space where I have to create content and come up with ideas and figure out a hook and deliver on a line. And I've had to really work on that, but I've lessened my role in inbox 0 and I've prioritized this other piece. And that's actually worked really well for our business because we are now making millions of dollars, I kid you not, millions of dollars off of my content, whereas before that wasn't existing and we weren't making millions of dollars off of me in my inbox.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because the part of 0 inbox, I knew it was originally getting it down to 0, but the part that I actually took away and heard was, hey, actually there's a rule. It's what you said. The same lesson you actually mentioned in your book was the rule is this inbox, we're going to create rules for our employees, etc. And the new rule you had for yourself is I only get to spend, rather than 3 hours in there to answer everything, I'm only going to spend 30 minutes in it because you get what you spend your time on, like you said. And now I'm going to spend way more time on the growth of the business, making the content that's making us millions of dollars, and not on the, let's call it updates or operations, because that should be delegated out. It should be handled. I need to be in the loop on certain things, but it should be able to get done in 30 minutes. And that's what I liked from that chapter, was that transition. Like, hey, this is the new rule, because if I spend 3 hours on that, like you said, then we're not growing. You're not making the content. You're not improving in the scale of the content, right? And that's what can make you millions. So what do you want to spend more time on? In your inbox, because it's comfortable. And it's very funny. I had the same thing. I had to go through the same transition when you're delegating any task out. You know, sometimes when there's pressure, we go back to what makes us feel good because we want that dopamine hit, right? We want that quick dopamine hit, when really we should be focused on the stuff that's hard, creative, vulnerable. When you're creating content, it's a vulnerable thing. You're putting yourself out there, right? And so I love hearing that story, and I love that you you transitioned that concept. Yeah, getting to 0 inbox, sure, great, but spending 30 minutes a day, I actually like that. You're like, no, I'm only going to spend 30 minutes a day on that because I'm going to spend all my other time on what really matters, which is growing the business. You know, and I like that component of it. I know we're running low on time, so the last thing I really wanted to touch on was the business planning. We talked about the numbers. Each year you guys have grown a substantial amount. And one of the things I heard you say when you're doing your annual meetings, and tonight you're going to do some reflection on it as well, is the goals that you set should both excite you and scare you. Kind of like, how are we going to do this? Talk to us about when you guys were setting those goals and you know that they can actualize. What's that process like? And just touch base a little bit for us on your annual planning, what that looks like.
It still terrifies me. Tomorrow morning, we have our quarterly team meeting where we are sharing what our goals are for 2025 with our entire company. So we kicked off our annual planning process back in August, set our revenue targets, got clear on what our objectives and key results are, like the main things we're going to work on in 2025. And it's this funny thing where every year we do the same planning, we do the same quarterly team meeting. I get nervous beforehand. I get excited beforehand. Now we have this track record of being able to point back to previous years and what we did and didn't execute on, and we execute 95% of the time, which is pretty exciting.
Huge.
It's a compelling story to be able to tell. So that now eases some of the nerves, but it's still terrifying because these revenue jumps are massive. It's not, we're going to add $1 million. It's tens of millions of dollars. And the coordination around all of it it's a new feat every single year. It's like, it's a total new rework of how are we going to do this? And how do I inspire people to get excited about taking on these problems? Because for most people, it can just sound like a lot of freaking work. And that's what it is at the end of the day. It's a lot of people doing a lot of things in order to make this grand vision come to life. But I think about every single time I get into this season of like, shit, this is going to be a lot of work. This is going to be hard. This is going to be challenging. I had this thought just yesterday. It's like, I, at one point in my life, prayed for problems like these. Like I really prayed to have this type of demand on my time and my energy and my thought process. And today I have these problems, and these are the problems that I always wished for. So now that I have these problems, I can't be upset about them. I can't complain about them. First of all, nobody cares about my problems. And that's an important lesson to know too. It's like, no one gives a shit about your problems.
They have their own.
They have their own problem. Everybody has their own freaking problems. So choose your problems. And I choose to choose massive, big problems, targets that are just like, how could we do this? I'm going to make this very important pivot in my own content and in what I'm working on to bring more women into our ecosystem. I'm really passionate about this and bringing more beauty products and just things women like buying, things I like buying into our business. Right now, we do a lot of home services. We do a lot of construction, which is cool. I love my dudes in construction. I love my ladies in construction too, in the home services space. But I realize that over the next 10 years, I want to bring in more businesses that I like doing business with too. And so you're going to see this change start to happen. But every time I'm about to make a pivot like this, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel natural. It feels like, oh, you should just keep doing what you're doing because the problems today, they need to be attended to. And when I start to have that thought process go in my head, I just remind myself that I get to choose my problems. So I might as well choose problems that I'm interested in solving, that I'm excited about solving, and that create the life that I want to have. And if I can make that my North Star, and if I can drive our team around my excitement around something, we will make magic happen. And it's what we've done for 5 years. It's what we're going to continue to do. But it does matter that the leader cares about the problems. If you don't care about your problems, you will never drive excitement from your team. So solve the problems that you want to solve. Choose your problems. And remember that as a business owner, that's what you get to do every single day when you actually set revenue targets. You're choosing the problems that you get to solve.
I love it. And one of the best things I love is no matter what, you're going to have problems. So you might as well make them these massive, huge, gigantic problems that when you solve them, it'll turn into what Cardone Ventures has turned into, and what I know for a fact will continue to grow, probably beyond your wildest dreams as well. Thank you guys, for both you and Brandon, for taking time for us. It's a huge deal for us, our podcast. We just really appreciate it. Thanks for giving us, some insight into what it takes to build something like this, to energize our people, to inspire them. We really appreciate it. We can't wait to watch it all unfold for you guys, and I'm just really grateful that you came on the podcast.
I appreciate you. I can hardly wait to listen to this in 5 years from now when you were making this move in your business and you were adding all these people, to be like, remember when this is what my plan was and I executed on that, and then we're able to talk about all the success that you've had.
Deal. We'll do it again.
Let's do it.
That's the invitation to do it again.
That's right.
And with that, guys, we will see you on the next one.